Hello. So it's been a while since I made a recording for this channel, and the reason is because I wanted to prepare for the upcoming chat that I'm going to have with Rob from the old solar system. And our topic was going to be the hero's journey. And I thought I would do a little bit of a research before I went into that chat, and it turned out to be a much deeper rabbit hole than I have anticipated. And the reason why I've been neglecting the channel was because I wanted to make this video, but I wanted to make it a little bit more substantial than off the cuff stuff that I've been doing so far. And so today's video is probably going to be a little bit more scripted than usual. And I'm going to talk about the hero's journey. And to prepare for that chat, I went and got myself a library's copy of the hero with a thousand the hero of a thousand faces by Joseph Campbell, and it was hard to get through. Hard. First of all, because like a lot of the language is a little bit older than I'm used to, and so there's a fair bit of translating that's going through my mind as I read through the book. Furthermore, the the language that Joseph Campbell uses is very esoteric. It was hard for me to wrap my head around the concepts, and so because of that, I had to go through the chapter several times. And by now, my copy of the book I have already returned to the library. It's like I seriously have to get my own copy. I thought it would actually be worthwhile to devote a very long series just on that book because there's so much to go through. To me, the most important thing about a good story is that it's gripping. It needs to make you turn the pages, and there needs to be some kind of a interest to hook you in, whether the interest is in characters or action or whatever. You know, there's got to be something for people to grab onto. And so I always thought that the kind of a literary analysis which I classed the Hero of a Thousand Faces under, I think is comparative mythology or something like that. I always thought those kind of scholarship to be, not worthless, but more like let's not let that get in the way of a good tale, if you know what I mean. So, why did I start getting into it? Well, part of the reason was well. So first of all, characters are not the focus that I have on in the Distant Sun, in the Adventures of Longtail. But I thought if we're gonna do it, write characters better, just because I'm that way, I'm not gonna just like uh, do a shitty work of it if I can. There might be a limit to what I can do, but I'll do my best while I'm doing it. And definitely one of the biggest wall I've come across is to write compelling female characters. So, so here's the deal. Back when I was a young artist, and I'm sure a lot of artists had, when they first started drawing anatomy, they have the same issues, which is that when I draw a woman, it would be a man with boobs. It would have the shoulder length, the shoulder width of a man with the hip size of a man, and then I'll tag boobs onto it. It was terrible. It was terrible, and I wanted to avoid that, and I could see it happening because I was like, some of the characters, like there's a main one of the main female characters I have, read like a man. I mean, it was intended to be that way, that she had more of that kind of masculine drive, uh, but you know, she's still a woman, she's still female, really, and so I was trying to write her with more feminine characteristics, because it's just, it shouldn't be a man with boobs. And while I was trying to find out more about how what would make a compelling female character, like I got drawn into a hero story. Basically, I was asking myself, what is a hero's journey for a woman? So there are some tales, there are some stories that intrinsically speaks to me as a guy. Uh, One of those stories would be, I talked about Hajime no Ippo in my previous video, and one of the things that drew me to Hajime no Ippo was just how the guy kept getting up, getting beat down and getting up. That is, to stand firm in the face of adversity, and to to get past that, to to face that challenge, grapple with it, and you might not win, but you don't break over it. That kind of heroism speaks to me, and I wonder if there was a similar thing for women. And so when I picked up A Hero of a Thousand Faces, I was going through it, and well, I never did find what is the equivalent of a female hero story, although I think I'm starting to get a glimpse of it. But chapter 3 was describing the structure of the monomyth. Not 100% clear on what the monomyth really means. He gave a few stories in the first chapter describing it, and as far as I can make out, it's like a recurring theme in the heroic story. And so the structure of a monomyth goes like this. You have the initiation, which is the call for adventure. Um, Abraham, God telling Abraham to get out of his father's basement, so to speak, and to travel. Well, Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, where the droids came, that was the call for adventure, you know. And answering the call would then bring the hero to uh, this. He calls it the separation, which I take to mean like the actual struggle, the heroic struggle of overcoming the dragon, so to speak. And for Luke, it would be his father, Emperor Palpatine, the Empire, basically. And for this would be the part where the hero struggles, and then he would overcome, and he would find the reason for his quest. And then the return. And this part was so interesting to me. So what Joseph Campbell said was, often the return was much more. I mean, the return basically means the reintegration of the hero back into society. The reason that the hero was allowed go away to separate from the rest of society was so that he could go forth, bring back this thing, and the return would be his reintegration into society, the fruit of the quest that justified him leaving society. And that reintegration often is more challenging than the quest itself. And I thought this was so great. I don't know how true it was, but it was so great. Because think about it. So in Chinese tales, we have something called Journey to the West, and I just watched a video on that mentioned Journey to the West by a channel called Literary Devil, which I think I would link to in the comment, because I think it's actually a great video. There were a lot of things that I disagree with him about, because for one thing, I feel the main character is not the monk. The main character should be the Monkey King, because a full the a full third of the book, the first third of the book, was about the Monkey King. And throughout the rest of the story, the monk gets into so much trouble, and it's always the Monkey King that pulled his ass out of the fire. The main character should be the Monkey King, I feel. And so Journey to the West is about the monk, the Monkey King, and the two other dudes, which I have trouble uh, translating into English because I actually don't know what the translation to English is. I'm gonna have to find out and add a comment down in the video. But it's about these four people going west to India to recover the scriptures of Buddha and then to bring it back to China and to spread that teaching. So the call to adventure was I guess it depends. So the call for adventure, I guess it depends on which of the character you're talking about. The first the call of adventure for the monk would be he was born with that destiny. You know, he was supposed it was always his destiny to go. He's like the reincarnation of a bodhisattva that was supposed to go get the scriptures. The call for adventure for the Monkey King was the monk coming up to him and literally saying, "Come with me." Because prior to this event, prior to the monk setting out on his adventure, the Monkey King, he had went up to heaven and crushed the place, and for punishment, the Buddha crushed him under a mountain. And the only way he was ever going to get free was if he agreed to go on the quest with this bodhisattva, this monk. And for the other two characters, it was the same case. Actually, the horse is a character too. I just remembered. Yeah, so it's actually a party of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, so each of this, so each of the other four had the call of. So each of the four disciples of the monk each have their call of for adventure, which the monk put to them, and they answered, and the journey is the quest. And after they recovered the scripture, they brought it. They will bring it. They will have to bring it back to China, and that's where the reintegration starts. And I thought that was a very clear arc of that monomyth. And there were some other tales. One of the examples that Joseph Campbell brought up was the myth of, was it Aeneas? Aeneas, he went. He's supposed to be the founder of Rome. Went down to the underworld, talked to his dad, came back, found Rome, blah blah blah. But what I found really interesting was there's like a whole classification of stories about people going to the underworld. It's called katabasis or something like that. It's like weird, and because when I was reading the example, I was just reminded of uh, this other story, Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus went down to the underworld because Eurydice died. He wanted to get his wife back, and so he went down to the underworld. He played music for Hades. Hades was so bowed over, so enchanted by his music playing that he allowed Orpheus to bring Eurydice back. On the way, however, he was not supposed to look backwards at Eurydice. He would lose her forever if he did. So he went all the way up. He got out of the underworld and turned back, not knowing that Eurydice is still in the underworld. So when he turned back, he saw Eurydice while she was still in the underworld, and she was taken away from him, and he never got to see her again, or something like that. And I was immediately reminded of another myth about a guy that went down to the underworld to look for his wife. That's all the way in Japan. It is a story of Izanagi and Izanami. Izanagi and Izanami are the parent gods of the Shinto religion in Japan. So these two This too gave birth to all the Shinto gods in Japan. In her last birth, uh, she gave birth to the god of fire, and she died in childbirth because the god of fire burnt her. Right. So she went, and Izanagi, who is the male god, wanted to go down to the underworld to find his wife. So he went down to the underworld, and unfortunately, Izanami had partaken of the food of the underworld, so she couldn't just leave the underworld with him. So he had he had the same restriction. So he was leading her through the underworld, but he is not meant. He cannot look back to look at his wife. So he took her hand, went all the way up, and unfortunately, just like Orpheus, he looked back and saw the horrifying visage of his wife who had died. And his wife was so angry that he looked at her in that stage and chased him all the way out of the underworld. She was like chasing him, and then Izanagi was like running away, and at the end he rolled a huge stone over the entrance of the underworld and covered it, and he never saw Izanami ever again. And so here's the interesting thing. I was relating this story to a few friends of mine. We were at a dinner party and something like that, and so my friend, she said, that is such a great metaphor for women. And so I was like, how come? And she said, sometimes men just go into this really dark place, and they just want the man to lead her out of that dark place, and to not look at her and feel afraid and be disgusted or anything like that. She just need him to lead her out of the underworld, so to speak. And I was like, you know what? That's actually really, really interesting. That's really interesting. And I thought, you know, they're probably all these old stories. They're probably encoded with all this little information bits about the human psyche, the way we treat each other, the way we interact with each other, the way we set our goals and move through life is probably encoded into all these myths. I was bowed over by how much similarities there are in this myth of Orpheus and Eurydice and Izanami and Izanagi, given that there's like such a huge distance and time separating the two. And so I started wondering, and even something like Journey to the West had such a strong uh, structure that had like such a strong similarity to the Monomyth structure that I feel is really worth checking out. And yeah, so I think so this would be probably the first video in this series where I explore the hero of 1,000 faces and then just basically give my take on it. And I'm not the best scholar of this kind of stuff, and I would love it if you guys would to write in the comments below, share your thoughts with me on what you think about the hero's journey. Until next time.